right, so I'm speaking on the full moon in Aquarius, 3 August 2020. And this is going to be a really climactic moment, I feel like, a really intense moment for the summer. There's always a lot in every syzygy, but this has a lot packed in, I think. And it's really a connective syzygy, one that's going to connect what we've been going through, what we are going through, and what we will be going through into 2021. Venus, there's a hidden Venus energy that's going to permeate this period. I describe Venus as being about relationship, pleasure, beauty, music, adornments. And haircuts and grooming are both classic Venusian activities, things like lotion, jewelry, makeup, but also spending time with close friends and love relationships. And Venus is about beautification, bringing people together. Ptolemy in the Tetrabiblos, this is right at the beginning of book 1, he talks about Venus being warm and wet. Best example, I think, here is when we give plants water and sunlight. We give them wetness and moisture and then heat from the sun. And Venus is the day triplicity ruler of earth signs. Think about when you step out of a shower, feeling refreshed, ready to face the day, feeling confident and strong about the self. So I think it's also a classic Venusian activity. The Birth of Venus by Sandro Botticelli. This is almost like the stand-in for Venus. Someone says, show me a picture of Venus, you're going to look at the Birth of Venus. And this is his painting where Venus has emerged right out of water. Venus can come with water, it's connected to water, and this is what I think is a big part of the next lunar quarter because Venus will be entering Cancer. Gail Gutman and Kenneth Johnson in 1993 wrote a book called Mythic Astrology, Archetypal Powers in the Horoscope. And here they talk about Venus having the power to make anyone, God or mortal, fall in love instantly. You know, who do you love? What do you love? And what does love feel like? This is a key thing I wanted to address because love's a feeling. And you can produce love just right now as you're listening to this. You can press pause and just think about times in your life when you love someone or love something and how good that felt and just how warm it makes you feel. You can reproduce that feeling just by calling it through memory right now. The full moon's ruled by Saturn, which Saturn is still strong in Capricorn. Saturn is retrograde, moving towards that direct station in September, but this ongoing limitation is still in force. There's a limitation of the year 2020, this Saturnian kind of being locked in and locked down and all the changes we've seen in the world. That's still ongoing now. Saturn is still in Capricorn. So Venus comes in because Venus rules the Egyptian term of the full moon and trines the full moon by sign. So Venus and Gemini will make that trine, throwing back rays into Aquarius. And so it's telling us, hey, look to Venus here. The relationships, even the long distance internet-based relationships can provide support. The other thing is only 3 planets outside of cardinal signs during this lunation, Venus, the moon, and the sun. And so there's this sense of 2 acute worlds taking place. Other than Venus, every traditional planet will be making a partile, hard aspect with another planet. And so this is really a sense of climax. Not only is the moon in climax with her fullness, but all of these other planets are making dynamic, hard aspects with each other, save for Venus, right? So Venus is separated out for it and ruling that full moon. And that's why I think there's this Venusian undercurrent. The upcoming school year may be blocked, or it's uncertain as if it will happen or not. So there's a lot of these mercurial significations being blocked and restricted right now. This full moon will charge that blockage even more. This Aquarius full moon gives an age of Aquarius type opening, like we had in March when Saturn ingressed into Aquarius in late March. So this full moon is kind of hitting that note again. And there's an opportunity here to turn to and embrace the changes that are coming, these Aquarian age changes, being digified, everything being online, embracing technology. And I think that this is a preview. This lunation is actually a preview of the Aquarian heavy 2021 because there is a new moon in Aquarius, February 2021, where you will have 6 of the 7 traditional planets being in Aquarius. Remember when Saturn entered Aquarius, Zoom, the online platform, had massive growth. During that time, I was doing a countdown with some other astrologers. We had all just been locked down. Zoom it was the fastest growing app in March 2020. Over February 2020, and so you can just see it there. It was the kind of Saturn ingressed into Aquarius story. Now I want to talk here also about cycle work, and long-term cycles don't require outer planets, dwarf planets, that's Pluto and the others, or even Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, or the nodes. And this may sound strange because so much of modern cycle work, Andre Barbeau, Richard Tarnas, exclude inner planets. You just punch into your search software, you find when has there been a full moon in Aquarius with Mercury in Cancer and Venus in Gemini. It will only happen 3 times in a 120-year period from 1910 to 2030. Those are 1961, 1980, and this upcoming full moon in 2020. And so isn't that strange, right? You only need the inner planets. And you can find these great long cycles, 3 hits in a 120-year period. We can go into the previous 2 charts in this chart and see what other connections we can make and try to figure out, well, what's the longer story here? They were both near a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, and that's a new cycle, that's a change in energy. That's what Saturn and Jupiter coming together does. It initiates almost a new turning of the wheel, you can think of it as. In both those years, a new political party won the election. So in 1961, John F. Kennedy was inaugurated after 8 years of Republican Eisenhower. And in 1980, Reagan wins the election after 4 years of Jimmy Carter. And so, 1961 ushers in the space age with man making flights into the upper atmosphere. 1980, you have the computer age with that personal computer becoming a common feature of people's homes. And I'm thinking the 2020 age, what is it going to be in 2020? Is it AI? Maybe it's the medicalization and kind of medical technology. But again, there's a new sense of a new age coming, and the age of something will be beginning here. Right around the time of the syzygy, of this full moon, July 31st, 1961, Ireland submitted its application to be the first non-founding country to join the European Economic Community. And that's Venus and Gemini. Remember, relationships with trade. This was a story coming out on 28th July that just emerged. China and the EU are speeding up negotiations on an investment agreement. And in 1980, the Summer Olympics were held in Moscow, but 82 countries boycotted the games. This was during that lunation, actually, that happened in late July in 1980. And then also you had the 4th president of Iceland, the world's first democratically direct elected female president. And I'm thinking the analogs that we may see now, obviously the 2020 Olympics have been canceled, or the first female vice president in America looks like that might be happening, with the betting odds so favoring Joe Biden, and he's promised to have picked a female vice presidential running mate. The full moon will be right near 15 degree minutes from the fixed star Albali. It's a star Ptolemy says is like Saturn and Mercury, and it's a strange star. It's the hand of the waterman, of the water pouring individual in the constellation Aquarius. So it's the steadying hand or the balancing wand for pouring. The ancient texts say it's sticks or a towel. But I think about it as as you're pouring out a heavy load of water in one hand, it's nice to be holding on to something else to steady the body during this August 2020 moment. How are you steadying yourself while you're pouring out your genius into the world and to the people around you? And here I think of daily routine, ritual practices that we're using on a daily basis to make sure we're grounded. The aspects I'm going to take a look at for this lunar quarter: 3 August, Mercury opposes Saturn. 4 August, Jupiter will square Mars. 5 August, Mercury enters Leo. 5 August as well, Venus will conjoin the North Node, 28 Gemini. 6 August, Venus conjoins Polaris at 28 Gemini as well. And then 7 August, Venus will enter Cancer to finish out this lunar quarter. Mercury right now in Cancer, applying to an upcoming opposition with Saturn and Capricorn. I tweeted this out. I saw a news story from Guardian News that India had arrested dozens of journalists and a clampdown on critics. The next, let's go here, 4 August, Jupiter square Mars, 20 Capricorn, 20 Aries. And Jupiter is in fall in Capricorn, remember. Jupiter will be sending a ray to Mars and Aries from earlier in zodiacal order. So although Jupiter is weak, it's giving to Mars and Aries. It's giving whatever it can give. And this is going to be a 3-pass aspect between Mars and Jupiter, as it will be with Mars and Saturn. And so you can see here, this is the first of 3. The last one will be 23 January 2021, and it'll actually be a Taurus Aquarius aspect. But this is kicking off something that will be here for quite a long time this fall. This fall, there's a lot of aspects that are repeating with these squares to Mars, and I think that we're now settling into that February 10th Aquarius new moon. And so the three past squares are actually part of this extended story that I think will culminate with those final Aquarian squares right around the time of that new moon in Aquarius in February 2021. Here's a news article, wbur.org, 28 July 2020. Want to feel happier? Science says try being more generous. And I want to always think about, anytime I think about Jupiter and fall, it's easy to have this story of lack, or I don't have enough, or I need more. But giving even when you don't have a lot to give, I think is a real way to embrace generosity and abundance and just feel good and feel happier. Jupiter squaring Mars, it's very rare to have these squares happening at 20 Aries, 20 Cap. And the last time it happened was in 1012. So 1,000 years ago. And that summer was the climax in the Arabian Empire of some unrest in Palestine that happened during that summer. The other thing is that we will have two squares in this degree in 2020 in August and October. The second passes in this exact same degree. And so it tells me that I think the unrest that we're seeing is not done yet, that the fact that we have the two hits in the same degree, when in the past it signified unrest before, I think we need to get used to people getting in the streets, and that the climaxes aren't here yet for the rebellions that we're seeing globally. Here was a story that I just saw today. I was watching actually a live stream of this earlier. So this is 1 August 2020, Euronews.com, protests in Berlin against coronavirus measures as cases rise. So they're protesting in Berlin. They're mad about the government response. And so I think we'll see more of that as we get into the fall. The older the date, the more difficult it can be to have certainty around events, which is why I really try to do cycle work in the last 200 years, where we have newspapers and maybe even eyewitnesses or video recordings. But in spite of that, we can explore symbolism which can be outside of history, right? Jupiter is expansion, protests are Mars. Jupiter overcoming Mars, sending that expansion and that dynamic square to the protests. I think we'll continue to see that as this year unfolds. And I also want to say here that it's an overcoming square from Jupiter. And so a lot of times we think about squares as being difficult, but when you have a benefic planet overcoming something, we call that being in a dominating position or upon the 10th. And I think it really can be delineated more positively than negative. What's your Mars and Aries story? You might have a sense of it now. You know, Mars has been in Aries for a little bit now, over a month. And what's your story? What house is it in your chart? Maybe Jupiter is now going to kind of bang out some of these direct degree hits to give you assistance with that as it unfolds. Next aspect, this is 5th August. Mercury is going to enter Leo. And Mercury spent a whole lot of time in Cancer because it had a retrograde station and a direct station in Cancer. Now Mercury is entering Leo. We're going to really have a shift with our Mercury, so less about home, less about body, and more about the sun. And Mercury will be under the beams of the sun the whole time that it's in Leo. Not only will it be ruled by the sun, but it will be blocked by the sun's light. And I think here that the communication is boiling down to talking about the self or self-promotion. This can be problematic if you're talking about yourself too much. People don't like that, so maybe you can watch a tendency to want to talk about yourself a lot, or to not be able to articulate where you're at or things about the self. You know, that's also part of how this can play out, and so that's okay. You know, you can be circumspect or just, you know, reticent during this time. It's okay. Hey, I don't know what's going on with me. This blocked Mercury during its time in Leo might be also a cue to just kind of sit back, purse the lips, and just feel and wait for those understandings to emerge. Also look for Mercury in the later degrees of Leo, because it'll be in its own Egyptian term, and then there is a nice in the heart of the sun transit in the later degrees of Leo. It's not during this lunar quarter, so I'm not going to go into it much more here. Venus conjunct the North Node, 5th of August. Venus meeting the North Node, love and relationships are going to be charged. You know, the North Node, it can be this expander in the sky, but it also can make things wonky because it's an eclipse point. The other thing is both Venus and ruler Mercury are outside of hard aspects from the cardinal action during Venus's conjunction with the North Node. So it's this moment where the cardinal energy kind of gets to rest a little bit when you have both Venus and Mercury slipping out of cardinal signs. And the moon in Pisces will be triggering via a dynamic overcoming square to Venus and Gemini. Also another way to do cycle work. I mean, Venus hitting a node, it's not very common for it to happen in the same degree, but the last time it was in the 29th degree of Gemini was May 11th, 1927. And we have this idea that the North Node can make things bigger or expand things is founded, and this is the Academy of the Academy Awards. And so it's founding of a new venture. Maybe that's the expansive feature of the North Node, with Venus being film and arts. So also this Venus conjunction with the North Node will be very close to Polaris, Polaris being 37 degree minutes from the conjunction. Polaris is the pole star. It's a star that's used in navigation and astronomy. Navigators look to that star to know where they are and where their direction is. So I think we can maybe lean into the pole star here. Maybe with this conjunction, this is a way to see where we're going for the rest of the year with Venus here. And maybe there's a hint of how art or music can be used by you, or those Venusian features can be used to guide you for the next 6-month cycle. Now let's go to Venus entering Cancer. This is 7 August. Venus will enter Cancer. The thing about Venus entering Cancer is that both benefics, Venus and Jupiter, and both malefics, Saturn and Mars, are all going to be cardinal signs. And so it's as if you throw everything in a bag and you shake it, and you shake it up. And I think that this will be really intense, because the benefic and malefic planets are the planets that can really change the tone or the feature of other planets. They're the planets that act on other planets to either really harm them or help their significations. Venus entering this dynamic cardinal axis, this will be more about relationships with others, right? How can we love better? How are our relationships with other people giving us solace? Or how are those relationships kind of exposing themselves or giving difficulty for the moment that we're in? It's almost like evening the score here. So maybe there's a sense that the Venus can take some relief off or lighten the load a little bit that Jupiter's been carrying. I checked here, did a search. Venus in Cancer, Mars in Aries, Saturn in Capricorn. The last time it happened was 90 years ago. This was in 1930, 28 May 1930. President Hoover penned his first veto. He struck down a bill that would have expanded pensions for veterans of the Spanish-American War. And so it's an example of the cardinal dynamism actually bringing about challenges, right? The government policy created challenges for citizens. Venus will be opposing by sign Saturn and Capricorn for this 3-week period, or however long Venus will be there. And so there's a real question here. What's the relationship between the citizens and the government? Venusian desires can sometimes be in conflict with the austerity from father government, and then anger results. That would be the Mars and Aries. And I want to say here that James Madison in the Federalist Papers talked about citizens being able to submit ideas for debate and refinement and implementation to the government for the public good. And so this is this relationship between the citizens and the government. And I mean, this is a theme that'll be unfolding, I think, with the crisis we're in, but maybe with Venus opposing Saturn, it's actually going to be more dynamically highlighted. The other thing is that this cardinal difficulty in 1930, the veto, set up some later change. And Saturn entered Aquarius in the early 1930s after this veto that President Hoover had. And what happened was you had what was called the bonus army. These were protests by veterans, and they were angry because they didn't get their pensions. They wanted their bonuses, and this won victories for veterans. So there were massive protests, and I think that that's where we are in the cycle right now. And this Venus in Cancer, Mars in Aries, Saturn in Capricorn hit 90 years ago is actually underscoring for me the fact that this 1930s turn of the cycle is right where we are. Biden as the new FDR, potentially, the Aquarian Democrat, is really what I'm seeing here. And also the 1933 and 1934, you had the most protests in American history. Some people have termed it the greatest strike years in U.S. history. Saturn was in Aquarius for all of 1933 and 1934. So we're going to get Saturn in Aquarius at the end of 2020. And I think that the policies now might be setting up massive protests during Saturn in Aquarius that will then result in some real, hopefully beneficial expansions into the government for the benefit of the people. 28th July in the Washington Post, quoting Biden as saying that there's a real inflection in American history, not unlike what Roosevelt faced. And so if Biden's going to be facing what Roosevelt faced, it's going to be protests, people saying, what the hell is going on? help us. This is the story that I've been watching closely. 30th July 2020. This is in The Guardian. Sam Levin. California landlords are locking out struggling tenants. A tsunami of evictions may be next. Government policy creating a crisis, just like in 1930 with Hoover's veto. The landlord-leaning eviction courts are about to make the coronavirus housing crisis a lot worse. This is Kate Ramsey Mason from phys.org, a website. So we're about to have a big housing crisis maybe. And this kind of lax response by the governments will set up the necessity of that FDR style expansion and great protests that I think will only extend into this Saturn and Aquarius period. So I want to now close here. One election chart I wanted to tap into here. This is the 10 August 2020 transit of the moon through Taurus. And it's a really good election, I think. One of the better spots we can access it out of this astrology. It's a sweet spot. The moon will be exalted in Taurus. The moon will be applying to a sextile with ruler Venus in Cancer. And so they'll be mutually receiving each other. And what that means is just that the moon has to rely on Venus for help and Venus has to rely on the moon. And then they make this sweet exchange through a really tight applying sextile. So it means that not only do they need each other, but they can help each other quite well because they see each other with this easy aspect. It's a waning moon, so this period might be better for decompression, rest, or letting go. The other thing is that the rulers of the fixed sign angles, if you can get a Leo rising wherever you're located, so if you're in Brussels, Belgium, this is the chart I pulled up, it'll be early in the morning, just as it becomes daytime, you can get a nice Leo rising chart. All fixed signs will rule the angles. They'll all have strong dignity. So this is really strong. Maybe you can bring Venus into the home, maybe, doing something to set your home up to be more of a loving place and a more of a supportive place for you. That's the kind of action I would look for during this time. Cartomancy pull. This is the 2 of spades. This is the 2 of spades, the arrangement card, the moon in Libra, that first decan of Libra. And I think about this like an arrangement. You're in a disagreement with someone and in order to quell that disagreement or to stop it from going out of control, you can ask them, hey, listen, can we make an arrangement? Can we make some kind of deal? And then having a temporary or hopefully longer lasting, but some kind of temporary settlement between two people of an issue. Venus is the great planet of negotiation and of relationship. The moon can sometimes be unsettled as it moves quickly. And so reaching that agreement, I think, is worthwhile. Remember, Saturn rules Aquarius, but is exalted in Libra. And Saturn can also be like new negotiated structures. So it's using that Venus-Saturn energy to reach an agreement or make an agreement. All right, as always, you can book a donation-based reading with me, Astrology for All, sjanderson144.com. I look forward to reading for you. This is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, so find it there if you like those players. And you can always follow me, Twitter, Instagram, at sjanderson144.